Hey friends, this is not a snow day. Day 46 in quarantine. I think this is episode 31 or 32. So many flavors, tough to keep track. I am Kevin Ozar, and I am going to have a short introduction today before we get to our interview with Tom Drelling. Tom is a former teacher, then assistant principal, then principal, now assistant superintendent in the Cleveland area, and he has some great perspectives, not just on education, big picture, but also in homeschooling. He's got two little girls at home that I've heard his efforts in the last 40 some days described as winning at homeschooling, from tree houses to passion projects. And the thing that I really enjoyed talking to him about is something I want to talk to you about, and we did it together, is the power of presentations, of public speaking, of getting your learners up and talking about what they're learning as a form of reflection, but also a form of cementing that learning and having them really truly own it. Tom also talks about the power of choice, the power of students owning their learning opportunities, this great moment as really a revolution point to change a lot of the things that are happening in education, and how many pumps in a squirt, how many ounces per squirt. It's kind of, I guess you kind of have to listen. So here it is, coming up to you, my interview with Assistant Superintendent Tom Drelling about homeschool and our schools in the community. Thanks so much. If you like it, please share it. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, and here it is. Tom and I have a great talk. Hey, Tom. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I
There you
can.
go. Hey, bud. Thank you so much for joining me. We are really excited to have you here because you bring a couple different levels of vision to this. You are a parent of school-aged kids, you are an educator, and you are now in a central office role. So you are the assistant superintendent of Independence local schools, and that's where about in Ohio is that?
We're a suburb just south of Cleveland, Ohio. It's probably about 10 minutes from the heart of Cleveland.
And I've heard that Cleveland rocks. Is that still true?
It does. Yes, it does. There's a song about it I've heard, but
Yeah, for sure. So when you were in the classroom, what did you teach? What was your teaching role?
I actually I taught a few years in third grade, where we cover all subjects, and then moved on to sixth grade where I taught math and science.
Okay. And you've moved up the ladder. You're a very talented educator, and you are now back in the classroom, which is also your house.
Yes.
So you have posted some things. We have some mutual friends who shared with me some of the stuff you've done. What have been some of the things that have been really successful as you've been homeschooling your two daughters?
I've really been working on trying to give them from the perspective of maybe a genius hour or a passion project. And so I kind of started off, we've had 4 projects. They're working on their 4th one right now. But the first one I focused on, I gave them an option to do a passion project where you're familiar with passion project, where they pick something they're passionate about and then really try to convey that passion to someone and in turn make them feel passion for it. An impact project where they have an opportunity to do some idea they have to make an impact. I said either on our house, on our neighborhood, on their school, on our community, or the world, whatever they wanted. Or they could do some sort of innovation project where they solved the problem, if you will, or made something better. And so I really wanted to keep it open-ended. I'm in my latter years of being principal, that became a thing I really just believed in, the idea of empowering kids to make choices in how they learn and just have a stake in not everything they're learning, but what they choose to learn about, and create more of an experience. And so, I have a 3rd grader and I have a 5th grader, and I feel very strong about the idea that, there are limitations as to what age. If my kid were in 1st grade, I would still have them go through this because all kids are able to make choice. It's just, what sort of results do you want to have? And so we really honed in on their experience of learning and then moved towards the presentation piece. And, my kids got in front of me and they prepared Google slideshows, and they casted them through our Chromecast on the TV. It was my wife, myself, and my mother-in-law via the iPad watching.
Awesome.
Watching the girls present. And then after we were done, we talked about, used a coaching model. I said, what are 2 things that you think you did really well? And then we talked about if there was one thing that you could change, what would it be? and we went on a reflection journey with them. And then I gave them some tips as far as presentation skills of eye contact and not just reading slides, but really sharing their story and their learning with their audience. And so we finished with that one. And after, honest to goodness, I really was kind of going to be done at that point. I thought they're going to be like, I don't want this guy. Who's this guy? I wish he wasn't in education. They asked to do another one. They said, are we doing this again? And I said, okay, we can.
Totally.
And so,
yeah.
And so instantly that day, and I saw what really makes me believe in this approach. I saw it in my own kids for the first time. I had to stop them from researching and working. It's Sunday and they're working 2-3 hours. I'm like, come on, kids, let's go outside. Let's do something. No, Dad, I just want to finish this. And just their desire to do something because they were given a choice. I saw it in my own kids. And then when they went to present, which you and I talked about this, look, presentation skills, it's one of the 4 C's, and it's the one often left off the list of communication.
Yep.
And communication is a skill that is not often practiced, and one that is so sorely lacking when you're talking about putting products into the world that can contribute to society, if you can't share your greatness in a succinct way, then, well, that's not doing anyone good but yourself.
Right. So I want to make sure we really underscore this, because the Passion Project is a perfect thing for you to not supplement education, but to create learning in these unusual times. That's just a given. So if you at home have already done one, it's a great time to relaunch, to revisit. But there's 2 other pieces that you did that I think are so important. And one of them is what you're saying right now, is presentations. I say this to my learners all the time. Like, you might not ever have to read a book and interpret it ever outside of school. You might never be asked about the Southern economy prior to the Civil War. That will probably not come up.
Right.
Most likely, someone's going to ask you to stand up in front of your group or your team or your peers or your stakeholders or your shareholders or the investors and say, I'm not in your head. Tell me what's in there. And
right.
So using this time to teach what we consider a soft skill, and I think it does it injustice, is calling it soft, is can you stand up confidently and articulate? And then you talk about Google Slides. You see this a lot. I think about 50 to 70% of the presentations I see from adults are terrible. Yes. They put way too much text up and they read it to you. And like, why are So what if we raise these kids who are mostly going to be working in teams and collaborating and presenting? Like, how do you put 25 max words on a slide? How do you engage with images? This is all stuff that they should be doing in school. We often don't get to it enough. You and I lament education every time we're together.
Yes. Yes.
We're tons of fun at parties. And so this is something that parents can do, is present it to me. What have you been working on all week? And then I love that you got your mother-in-law involved, that you got some audience members that were there. The second part is that reflection. And I think sometimes in education and in home education, we just want to get it done. Like, you do the math packet, like you turn it in, you submit it. Learning happens in the reflection. So you said, what are some things you did well? What would you do next? What kind of things did your 3rd and 5th grader come up with when you intentionally had them reflect on what they did?
So interestingly enough, they thought they did. I remember my Peyton, my 3rd grader, said, I thought my eye contact was really good, Dad. And I said, you did a really nice job of that. You were really looking at us the whole time. She goes, yeah, I wasn't reading from my cards or from the screen. And I said, when we talked about reflection, is there anything else you would do differently? It's funny, on the first time they presented, she said, yeah, I would include more images for you to see what I'm talking about. And then the second time she said, no, I was pretty happy. It was hilarious. But mind you, I challenged both. Yeah, I challenged both of them on after the first one. I said, you should think before you do this next one. Think about how you can get your audience involved. So Peyton rolls out with her passion of painting the next time. Next thing I know, during her presentation, she has the audience up there she has samples of paints out with the different textures and things, and she's challenging us to actually create something. It wasn't her passion, it was her impact project. We were making positive signs to pass out through the neighborhood. And so, yeah, and then Camden, she was solving a Lent problem. I don't know, I'm speaking for a friend who can't keep their Lent promise and might, tackle sweets earlier than they're supposed to.
Interesting.
She wanted to rewrite healthy sweets And so she made the chocolates for us to sample and try in the audience. And then she asked for feedback. This was all during their presentation. And all I asked them to do was, how can you get the audience more involved? I didn't give them ideas. I didn't give them
Right.
examples. But sometimes if you lead with the question, and here's the thing with parents, everybody, all these parents that are frustrated, I understand that because you're trying to fit your experience with your kid. What you don't realize is, I don't think all the learning, I think people are starting to realize, look, you go to school for 6.5 hours. We aren't spending 6.5 hours saying, A plus B, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. There's a hypothesis. No, that's not what we're doing. It's all these other skills. When you talk about advocating for yourself or sharing your experiences, our parents have these skills. They can teach their kids these skills. It doesn't have to be inside a textbook. That's where all the real learning happens, is all the stuff outside the textbook.
So what do you think is causing? See, I love that you said that frustration, because I'm a parent who's sometimes frustrated with this. As a teacher, I'm hearing tons of frustrated parents. What do you think why do you think parents are having a hard time conceiving of school, or this new reality of school? Like, what are you seeing from your spot, really looking at a whole district?
Yeah, what I'm seeing from our spot is the certainty that it's happening, that their kids aren't falling behind it. And the truth is even if the kids were in school, you don't really have that certainty. I think we rely on that report card or those test scores to be our mark of whether or not they're doing well, and to some degree that's one piece. But how about your kids' happiness in what they're exploring and what they're learning? What if that were our measuring stick? Our kid gets up excited to try and learn what's next, or to be curious and learn more. What if parents looked at it from the perspective of saying, instead of me showing you how to do all of this, then, let's see what you want to do. Now, that being said, it's not fair to just kind of throw that out there, because I know there are teachers who are continuing with workshops. I read this thing, a worksheet on an iPad is still a worksheet. And so I can understand that piece where there's some of those assignments that are falling short, where there we have teachers who are trying to fit their square peg in a round hole as well. When the reality is, we're all first year teachers in this, and we have to remember what that was like back then, because there were struggles. And where there are struggles for us as a first year teacher working till 10, 11, midnight. I have a friend who's grading papers till 2 a.m. I think we're all trying to wrap our heads around what's efficient and how this can be successful. And at the end of the day, parents and teachers both, they don't want to fail the kid. So that adds to the frustration.
Yeah. So one of the reasons that you and I get along so well is that we both kind of love blowing stuff up, trying new stuff and innovating. And that is sometimes very frustrating for the people who work with us and around us and who we work for. And so that said, yes, this is kind of a cool moment. What do you think, or what would you like to see happen at this potential turning point in education, as we're all really examining practice and efficiency and effectiveness? What are some what if dream scenarios, or anything that you want to just call to the possibility of as we look at education right now?
I think this is the best in my time in education, and what I've been in 22 years. And I'll tell you, this is crazy to say, but this is actually the best moment I've seen in education for a while, because we're being forced to tackle the word, as an educator, the word facilitator. And to me, I think if educators can become facilitators, that is the path to engaging kids. If they're really invested in their time. Yeah. And I feel like this will explode the excitement for returning to school, the excitement for, and returning to school may look different from here on out. Whether we come up with a cure or not, or whatever that is, I do believe education is going to look different, and we won't have this thought of, well, this too shall pass. It's not going to pass.
No, this is not a snow day, man. This is what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. And so the sage on the stage, all those little cliches you hear about, what it was when I went to school, what you went to school, getting kids involved in teaching and learning, and I say that, getting involved in the teaching and learning, them presenting, them sharing, them teaching, as well as them learning. I'm really, really excited. It makes me want to be a principal again, to be quite honest. I really want to be in those conversations with teachers and say, All right, so what are you noticing now? What are some things that can do different? And I would like for one day the teacher to say, you're asking us, Tom, but we're missing some important parts to this conversation. And for them to call out, we need students to build this recipe, because never once have we included them in the conversation. And I don't care what grade they're in. I taught third grade. I'll tell you right now, I'll invite a third grader to the conversation, and they will provide insight that is so valuable, and it won't have me beat my head against the wall.
Yeah, for sure.
But I'm clearly at my soapbox at that point.
You are, dude. This is a place to be in a soapbox. Now, you talk about wanting to go back to be a principal. As we just close up real quick, you are in charge of operations for a giant district.
Yes.
So you guys are already, people in your place are already looking forward to, what does the end of the year look like? What is the launch? What's our A plan, our B plan, our D plan? You were doing some really interesting math. Could you tell us a little bit about what you guys were thinking, what you had to figure out? Because I just think that's funny to share with everybody.
Yeah, I never thought in my career. Yeah, so I'm in charge of operations, which includes the return and the planning of how are we going to keep employees safe. So we're starting summer cleaning here on Monday, and so I have to figure out hand sanitizer for the fall. I want to make sure we have enough hand sanitizer for kids, so I'm balancing product, and so I came across a company who said, hey, look, we're putting these 1-gallon stations together, and I said, all right, well, how much should I? He goes, I need you to calculate for the whole year. I go, well, I don't know how much a pump gets. How much pumps? And he goes, well, I don't know. He says, let's do a test. So we counted the number of pumps to see how many squirts we got. So I was counting how many squirts. So I figured you needed 6 squirts per kid a day. That's 6,000 squirts. And so I'm doing math on there, and how many squirts do I get in the pump? And then pretty soon the conversation gets a little bit off topic.
Well, you can't use those two words together and not find yourself in some deeper, tumultuous waters there.
Yeah.
So you in essence have like the Tootsie Pop, how many licks to the center, like wild math.
That's exactly right. And then you're calculating other things too. Like, here are some of our realities. I have to figure out where we'll likely make masks a school supply, and yet I still need to provide masks for those who do not have them. And so tomorrow I'm going to pick 1,000 masks up just to get us through our summer cleaning with our team in the event that they don't have them. So some of those realities, I mean, in the midst of all this, hey, I want learning to be exciting. We're trying to create a space for it. So this is such a unique time, not just in the world, but in education, of course. But I think overall, the country has responded extremely well when it comes to the education world. I mean, we were asked to switch things in 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah.
And life is happening.
It's happening, man. It's totally happening. Well, Tom, I really appreciate you squeezing us in. I'm sure you've got lots of pumps to count or squirts to measure or masks to fasten.
Let's just say 1 ounce for every squirt is what we came to, by the way.
I love it. I'm sure there's a lot of educators or parents out there thinking to themselves, like, you've never seen my child just
right.
Let it on. So thank you so much for being here. Thanks for the work that you're doing and guiding your staff. If people wanted to know more about some of the stuff you've talked about, do you have a blog or a Twitter or an Instagram they could follow along at? Is that stuff you do?
I'm not good at it.
That's okay. You be good at all the other things you are good at.
Yeah, thanks so. But
you're welcome. Well, tell your daughters that they have been an inspiration, and we appreciate you sharing your journey with them as a parent and also some of the stuff you're seeing as an educator.